Today is Sunday, May 21st, 2023. The readings for today are John 20, John 9, and Acts 26. So John 20. At that time Mary stood up weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept she stooped to look into the tomb. She saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus has lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Saying this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom do you seek?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and said to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. Okay. Acts 26. In those days, King Agrippa said to Paul, "You have permission to speak for yourself." Then Paul stretched out his hand and made his defense. "I journeyed to Damascus. The authority commissioned chief of priests at the midday, O king. I saw on the way a light of heaven brighter than the sun, shining around me and those who journeyed with me. And when we had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in Hebrew language, 'Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It hurts you to kick against the goads.' And I said, 'Who are you, Lord?' And the Lord said, 'I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Stand to your feet. I have appeared to you for this purpose, to approach you, to serve and bear witness to the things in which you have seen me.'" Blah, blah, blah. Send you, blah, 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 blah. Turn from darkness light, from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and place along with blah, 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 blah. Alright. And then the final reading of John. At that time Jesus passed by, he saw a blind man from birth. The disciples said, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be made manifest in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night comes when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." As he said this, he spat on the ground and made clay of his blah, 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 blah. So he went and washed and came back, seeing the neighbors, blah, 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 blah. It's not this man who used to sit in a bag. No, but he... Alright, let's come back to this. It's giant. Alright. So let's start with John 20, 11 through 18. This is the first appearance of the resurrection, according to John, by Mary Magdalene. So let's look at this. She saw two angels. They said to her, "Why are you weeping? The guy's dead." She turned around and saw Jesus standing. Okay. So let's look at the, we need to find the verses. Let's look at the NIV. Okay. So John 20. Verse 14. Is what I'm looking for is this. What is the Greek word for saw? That's what I'm looking for. It's probably ophthe or something. But let's look. She turned back around. She sees. Oh no, it's theory. Okay. All right. So the word for saw is to look at, to gaze. I see, experience, discern, partake of. From theoros, an envoy or spectator. Behold, to look, to observe, to observe. Okay. So this is just the general word for seeing. It seems like it's not anything other than to see, to behold. It's general. Just look. It probably just means to see. Okay, so there's the resurrection. There's a couple of things in Acts we want to think about. So, because they're not going to use that word. I'm pretty sure in Acts they use ophthe. We'd fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And I said, who are you? And the Lord said, it's... He didn't even see him. At first he heard him. Okay. When he had fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in Hebrew, at midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven brighter than the sun, shining around me. People think this might be a migraine, which would be really funny. And I said, who are you? And I said, but rise, which I will appear to you. Jesus says a ton of stuff. I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but declared first those messages. He didn't even see him. Paul didn't even see him. He just heard him. You have permission to speak for yourself. Then Paul, okay, so Paul's talking to the king. I journeyed to Damascus. I saw on the way from heaven, brighter than the sun, a light. So all he saw was a light. And then he heard a voice. And then he's saying, for I have appeared to you. But Paul doesn't really say anything. So let's look. I think this is the opte. There's not a lot here, really. 26:1. Get up and stand on your feet. I have appeared to you. I mean, he appeared to him as a light, though. He didn't appear to him as a person. So this is Acts 26:15. I then said, who are you, Lord? The Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Okay. Oh, wait. Not. What did I say? 17? Oh, 16. I have appeared up then. Yeah, here we go. So he appeared up then. Up then. Horeo. What? It's like to behold. So anyway, if you're interested in like deconstruction of the meaning of the terms that are used for the appearance of Jesus's resurrection, resurrection narratives. I forgot who the author is. This one. Reginald Fuller talks about he talks about the meaning of the resurrection in the context of the language that is used and also the meaning of those words in the Jewish tradition, which are essentially like the resurrection is a change in modality of being. And so he makes kind of the claim that the verbs used to see the risen Christ are verbs that are required for seeing in the second mode of being, which is the spiritual mode of being. And so the resurrection, it's not a physical resurrection. It's not like the body is reanimated. It's kind of the idea here. Alright, but let's go back because now there's quite a bit to say about some of the other stuff. Okay. Alright. I don't know if are we gonna do this whole thing? I wish they had a read out loud button. All right. Saw a blind man who had sinned. This man of his parents. There's no way I'm gonna read this. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Go wash in the pool. The neighbors are those beggars. Said, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Okay. So what did he heal the blind guy? Okay. Okay. The Jews did not believe. Da da da. What did he do? He opened my eyes. This is just a metaphor. Why, this is a marvel. Could be a psychosomatic conversion healing. Jesus here is good. Okay. Alright. I'm not going to do anything with that. There were some other things I wanted to say about Acts. I mean, there's things we can say about the resurrection. I guess the thing that I haven't really had a chance to mention yet is, like, what is the meaning of the being that is resurrected, essentially? So let me I'll pull something up. Maybe we'll start there. I don't remember where I put this. Probably here. It's Heidegger. Footnote 3. Alright, so the resurrection of the body is all these grammatical errors Word is interested in all of a sudden. That one's wrong, but it is not other in the sense to which. Okay. Microsoft trying too hard. Alright, so, I mean, we can think of, so we just talked about the way in which the resurrection is a resurrection from a physical to a spiritual mode of being, and that the language used is often a spiritual seeing, except that's not the case in John. But the being of the human being, Heidegger calls Dasein, which is being there, and he traces it to presence, which is important for the witness of the resurrected Christ is the perception of the spiritual presence. We talked about that on Friday, which is William James's, which has to do with the concept that William James traced in varieties of religious experience through Starbucks surveys of religious experience among those, like in Iowa and in the Midwest and in other places. So if you want to know anything about William James, what you actually want to look at is this guy, E.D. Starbuck, who was the one who actually did all of the research that James just basically curated in varieties, and then appended his argument that his belief in God is stupid, but he does it, he believes it anyway. I don't really understand what it is that William James adds to the conversation, but that's okay. He went to Harvard, so we all have to like him. Alright. Okay. So, that's good. I think that's probably enough about the resurrection. So a lot of what the West is going to want to say about the resurrection of Christ, and we talked about this at the end of yesterday, is that the perception of the resurrection of Christ, the being that appeared to Mary and the disciples, is actually their own inner being. And the Christ event triggered the possibility of the perception of the individual's own inner being. That's the suggestion of the individualism of the West. So we'll leave that there, I think. There were some other things I wanted to say about Acts. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, persecution. So, I mean, if we want to also do a psychological thing here, I forgot where I put this. It's probably not in there. There's the idea in psychology that, so in the Christian tradition, the idea is that the sick human individual has to repent and go towards the light, essentially. But kind of a more holistic reading of this passage in particular suggests that there is an extent to which one must be sick. So Paul could not have converted except if he had been persecuting. And so the idea in psychology is that, for example, if you were to simply attempt to put the gospel, which was defined on Friday, into like a clinical setting of a therapist, the idea would be that the therapist would just say, repent and believe, right? That would be the translation. But there's an extent to which not everyone is ready to repent and believe, is kind of the argument. And so horrible human people have to do horrible human people things in order for them to see that the conversion is necessary. I don't think we're going to say much else about that. Alright. I send you to open their eyes that they may turn from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God. Isn't it so nice to think that there is just evil and good? And that somehow people can ascertain the distinction. What a wonderfully simple and comforting worldview. What could he possibly mean by this? I mean, remember, this is the Christian tradition putting the words of Satan and God into the mouth of literally their human God. So I send you to open their eyes that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God. I mean, they're saying they know good from evil. Jesus is saying, at least Jesus is saying he knows. But remember, in the context of the psychologized West, the one who discerns good from evil is the individual human being, whose being is revealed to them. And it's through the revelation of their own being that they can discern good from evil. Right? So I'd be very wary. I mean, the suggestion here is, if you psychologize Acts, even if you don't, there's no human person who can tell you the good from the bad. It's either God or it's you. It's never somebody else. That's very important. Okay, forgiveness of sins and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Alright. Can I find like a summary of this online or something? Like, I don't really want to read this whole thing. This is pretty long. The Greek Orthodox Church would just shorten their liturgy. How many more people would attend? Alright. Here, let's have Google tell me what the Bible means here. Here's Wikipedia telling me what the Bible means. Healing of a man who had been blind, miracle, and their subsequent dealing with the Pharisees. The man born blind comes to complete faith, while some of the Pharisees remain. The author of the book containing the chapter is anonymous, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Why do they only have some verses here? It's kind of cool. Oh, nice painting. Alright, let's go back. Let's see if there's any good tidbits in here. The neighbors and those who... Okay, so I guess the question: how did he heal him? The interesting. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So this guy has a psychosomatic conversion disorder. Essentially, that's the means of the healing. Like, how else would he be healed? So he has some psychological thing that correlates to some physical thing, and he's blind because of that. And so the question is, why? So why did God hurt him? Why did God make him blind? It's not. Oops. It's not because the man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be made manifest in him. So here's the link back to the moralism. Right? Where did we see it in here? Christ knows good from bad. The human person knows good from bad because the human person is connected in the image of God to God himself. So it is not that this man sinned or his parents, but good works might be made manifest in him. So horrible things occur according to this line of reasoning because of time. So the time element becomes important. So why is this man born blind? So that in the fullness of time, great works of God might be manifested in him. So why do bad things exist? So that good things can come of them. Okay. He spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle and anointed the man's eyes, saying, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Alright, so is there any psychological or symbolic meaning of spitting on the ground and making mud from the spittle and clay? What is the psychological meaning of that? I guess it's... So spit is water from the person, so the water of life, and clay is earth, so spirit and earth. It's like a certain natural or chemical process. Go wash in the pool. So okay, so look at this. All right. Well, I guess the way to read it is, so bad things happen to children, not because of their parents or their own sin, but because God wants good things to occur. And the means by which the good things are brought out of the bad things is an alchemical procedure of the inner human person. All right, so interpret this entirely psychologically. So Christ is the inner being in the human being. Spit is the water of life. Clay is the earth. And so it seems that the manner of this individual's healing is in the fullness of time. The human person will bring about a alchemical combination of earth and water, of groundedness and spirit, groundedness and the water of life. So ground in life, nature in life, life in nature, and through the soaking in the pool. So the pool is the unconscious, and so through the natural elements of the person. So the elements of the earth, which is the world, the water of life of the inner human being. So the being in the earth, soaked in the unconscious, will bring about the resolution. Is that how it happens? So he went and washed and came back seeing. Yep, that's it. All he had to do was bathe in the unconscious briefly. So the being and the world and the introversion. So it's like this going out, it's like the human person, the spit of the human person, combined with the earth, but going out into the world. And then a bathing in the introversion heals the man who can't see. And that's the story of the spiritual experience, essentially. Is the being of the human being goes out into the world, mixes their lifeblood with the world, goes back into intuition and introversion, and can then kind of through the alchemical combination of the being and the world, and the reflection on being in the world, can then see. And what can they see? We talked about yesterday what the human person sees in this combination of their divine being with the world. It's not through cultural construct, but it's through the divine spirit. What makes communities and what brings people together is not the cultural constraints or the rules of culture, but it's through the universal human spirit. Alright, are we done? I am the man, then how were your eyes opened? The man called Jesus made clay out of spit and rubbed it in my face, and I went into the water. Alright. So I think maybe one of the implications, there's no way I'm reading all of this. One of the implications is, it seems to me, must be, that there's going to be these periods. There are so I mean, I think we ought to consider this a microcosm of. It's more than that. It's like it's a it's a allegory. It's a hyper condensed story about a life process. In the hyper condensed story, it takes place over the course of probably an hour. But it's an allegory for years of a life. So I think part of the idea here is that the life process begins with the person who can't see, doesn't understand. The person, through the motivation of their being, which is the spit, which is like the lowest, it's like a lowly, so when you spit on someone or someone spits on you or you spit at somebody, it's like you're spitting out the worst. It's like you want to make them unclean, essentially. And so the spit is kind of this unclean aspect of this perfect being, Christ, or the inner human, the being of the human being. So this sort of metaphysical person. It's like this ontological person within a person. So the immaterial person within the person. And so the spit, the human being, moves out into the world through kind of the lowest part of their being. They just move out into the world with the lowest part of their being, the spit of their being. And they encounter the earth and the world. And through this combination, this alchemical combination, it's alchemical because we're not concerned about the chemical properties of it, we're concerned with the psychological, symbolic meaning of the combination. So through the combination of the lowest part of the being, the spit of the being, and the dirt and the clay and the lowest part of the world, those two things come into contact and they form this new thing. This new clay, this mud clay. It's like mud clay. That mud clay is put over the eyes. It kind of darkens the eyes of the person who moved out into the world, whose eyes were already dark, but it covers those eyes. It covers the eyes. So because blindness is not true blindness, it's a spiritual blindness in the case of the human being. So they can see, but then their eyes are covered by the darkness of the spit and the clay. And through that darkening of, now this person is truly blind. So think of the person whose multiple years of life this story represents. They could see, they were blind in the spiritual sense, but they could see, right? But now it's totally darkened by this mud clay mud. And so they have nothing, they can't do anything but introversion. And so the introversion is the descent into the pool. The pool, the water is the unconscious. And so this person now who has this clay over their eyes, the clay is now washed away by the waters of the unconscious. So there's this introversion process. And so the individual person whose many years of life we're considering, spiritually blind, goes out into the world through the spit of their being, encounters the world whose dust and clay blinds them even more deeply. There's a deep resignation towards the world. And then they're kind of compelled or forced into this introversion. And through the introversion, they can then start to realize and see and understand those things that they couldn't see before through reflection on their encounter with the earth. And they come out of that and they can see. And now they have a new spiritual awareness. Alright, so I wonder if maybe the Pharisees are pissed. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. The Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, "He put clay in my eyes, and I washed, and I see. This man is not from God, he does not keep the Sabbath." But others say, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" There's a division among them, so they again said to the blind man, "What do you say about him since he opened your eyes?" And the guy said, "He's a prophet." Jews did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight. "This is your son. How does he now see?" The parents answered, "We know this is our son, and he was born blind. And how he can now see we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him if his age to speak." Parents said that his parents said this because they feared, ask him he is of age, he will speak for himself. And his parents said that because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess him to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore the parents said, "He is of age, ask him." Alright, one more paragraph here. So they called him again, give God the praise. You know the man is a sinner. Yeah, no, one thing I know is that though I was blind, now I see. They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "For he told you. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you too want to become his disciples?" And then blah, blah, blah. "You are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. God has spoken with blah, 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 blah. But as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Why, this is a marvel. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born in utter sin and would teach us." Aha. So essentially the Pharisees denied any of this stuff and just said, "You're a sinner." Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said, "You have seen him, and it is he who speaks to you." He said, "Lord, I believe." Okay, so the Pharisees just didn't care, I guess, basically. Yeah. Okay. Alright. So I think this is kind of just the story of bad things happen to you, you're born into bad things happen you can't control. Jesus tells you, essentially your inner being reminds you, this is something you already know. You don't have to read this in a book. You already know this deep within your being, because your being knows this. Your being already knows this, but it's nice to talk about it. So your being knows that the bad things that happen to you will be completed in the fullness of time. It won't necessarily be resolved. I think maybe one of the interesting parts about the Christian religion is it suggests that the broken aspect of the body which the being inhabits will be healed in the fullness of time. But I think if you consult the inner being doesn't say that, there's going to be a happy ending. It just says that it's going to be resolved. The being is going to be content with the resolution. In the fullness of time, the being will be content with the resolution. And that's through the outworking and the inworking. The relationship between the inner being and the outer world will be resolved in the fullness of time. But that it doesn't mean it's going to be good. Like if you're addicted to drugs, it's not as if, your inner being might ultimately want to not be addicted. But who is to say the fate of the addict? What is the fate of the addict? Okay. Alright, I think that's it. Thanks for watching.